Just as Jin vanishes into the thin air with a loud swoosh, the inn fills in with murmurs. Everyone looks at the very spot where the boy was seated and begins to wonder if it was a summon which just happened. The waitress who had served the lot their meals just a little ago approaches Benny and I and inquires with evident curiosity if they are traveling summoners. Benny, with a slight hint of pride, clarifies that they are actually on an important mission. Ed, who happens to be standing right there, slumps her shoulders in a disapproving manner. They are not supposed to be revealing their plans to strangers. Benny then goes on to ask the waitress of a place where him and I can spend the night and also buy some supplies. Interestingly, at a distant table sit two dubious-looking men, whispering into each other's ears while side-eyeing Benny and I. As the two make their way to the address given to them by the waitress, Benny can't help but feel lucky that the demons haven't attacked the place yet. I rejoins that the army is holding them off at the border. This doesn't shush Benny, who only has more predicaments to incite. He questions why I is being sent to the north considering that their Goran army isn't too shabby. I sighs and instructs him to get supplies from the general store while she buys food from the market. At the fruit stall, she tries to tiptoe her way to the front through a swarm of people, all twice her size. In the process, she bumps into somebody and thrashes her arms in the air to keep herself from falling. Funnily, she does manage to get to the front but forgets to bring her purse. Just as she turns to leave, the same crowd surrounds her again. The suspicious-looking men from the inn, although out of A's sight, happen to be standing nearby, making the most of the ongoing chaos. Later, sitting around a bonfire, Benny exclaims how people can be terrible sometimes. A, who has tears running down her face, nods, her tongue visibly tied since the events at the fruit stall. She has her shoulders slumped as Benny adds that they are really not the right fit for this mission. They ponder how if the country is destroyed, it will most definitely be their fault. Meanwhile, a strong beam of light cuts his path into a modern-day apartment complex. With a loud whoosh and thump, Jin is back in front of his gaming setup, in his gaming chair. Like always, his dark hair are a mess and his pale skin glows in the dim light. He rejoices being back into the real world and recalls how much he enjoyed the VR game this time. But before he can recollect any further, somebody bangs loudly at his door. The banging is followed by loud yells instructing him to open the door. It is then that he realizes that the banging has been happening since before he got back. He gets up to open the door, and just as the door opens, he is pushed down to the floor with a thud. He gets up to see his dad standing before him, panting heavily with rage. He screams at Jin, asking of his whereabouts and what he has been up to. Before Jin can even utter a word, his dad begins yelling at him again. He is still on the floor, unable to move and speak, unable to comprehend whatever is being said to him. What feels like an eternity passes by and Jin is still on the ground. The terror of his dad's wrath grips him far more tightly than any apocalypse from the VR games that he owns. He stares at his dad, who looks down on him coldly and asks, almost yells about his habits of locking himself in his room. He states that the least Jin could do is eat with them as a family, so that his mother doesn't have to worry about him. Jim's mother, who happens to be standing closely behind, appears worried but chooses not to speak. His dad adds that he has been knocking on the door for hours waiting for Jin to at least reply. Once again, his dad's anger begins to surge. Jin's mother comes to her husband's aid and attempts to stop him from losing his apparent sanity. She tells him to calm down and further assures that she will talk to their son herself, prompting him to leave. Jin's father leaves the apartment quite visibly disturbed from his son's behavior while also choosing to keep chaos from ensuing any further. He makes his way to a roadside bench. His eyebrows are scrunched in irritation as he lights himself a cigarette while also pondering how he ended up having a son like Jin. Meanwhile, Jin's mother attempts to come off a little less harsh than her husband as she makes her walk across to his room to talk to him. She explains that she has been worried for him as he hasn't had a bite of food in days. She adds that they have been wondering sick about his well-being. Just as she is about to add another phrase of concern, she notices something bizarre. Bread on Jin's gaming table. Interestingly, she doesn't remember placing it there or even buying it in the first place. Jin notices his mother's expressions go grim. To cover up the chaos, he tells her that he is up to something important and she should leave him alone. His mother just stands before him, quite immobile and also apparently tongue-tied. It takes her a good few seconds before she weakly breathes out, "Okay." His mother leaves his room and settles herself on the living room sofa. Her shoulders slump and she instantly buries her face in between her palms. At the very same instant, Jin's dad smokes a cigarette, quite visibly tense from the ongoing havoc. As Jin ponders upon the ongoing dilemma, he notices that his damaged feet from the earlier incident. Upon this, he can't help but wonder as to why in the other world, even huge monsters can't cause him any harm, but in his real world, his feet got a cut from a mere door. A strong feeling of hate grips him as he realizes that he despises the real world. Meanwhile, Benny appears excited after maintaining a 4-day streak of sleeping on the ground. Ai, on the other hand, doesn't seem to be reciprocating the same emotion as she sits with her face buried in between her legs. Having not eaten anything proper in days, their stomach rumbles quite loudly. Being the ever-optimistic, Benny still rejoices the pretty view. He makes an effort to cheer Ai up by stating that they must run all fours like a horse to get to their destination in time. This only infuriates Ai further, who has been crying since she can recall. To give an outlet to her feelings, she begins screaming at Benny for not being able to catch a single fish with the rod that he had bought. To this, he calmly replies that it isn't really his fault if there's no fish in the lake. Taking matters in her own hands, Ai then snatches the fishing rod from Benny's hand and jumps in the water to look for fish herself. Benny rejoices how Ai is a better fisherman than a summoner, annoying her once again in an attempt to cheer her. Ai falls to her knees, almost despising herself and questioning her fisherman skills. Benny sits at the edge of the river, feeling helpless and hungry. There's no food around. In his moment of despair, he tells Miss Ai that there might not even be any fish in the river. Miss Ai responds, showing her stubbornness and desperation to eat something. She exclaims that no one can know whether there are any fish in the river just by making such an exclamation. She takes out a wooden stick with a rope tied to one end and swings it into the river. Within seconds, there's a tug in her fishing rod. She pulls it upward with a huge jerk of her hand, revealing a fish helplessly caught on the hook. Both Benny and Ai are thrilled by this moment. Holding the fish in his hand, Benny exclaims that Miss Ai is an amazing person. Perhaps she's more like a fisherman than a summoner. Being appreciated in this way is the ultimate wish of a summoner. Just before this, she had been called a farmer. Now, being appreciated as something more like a summoner is really depressing for her. Regardless, both of them set aside their roles as they are hungry. They impale a fish with a sharp piece of wood and place it over the fire. The aroma of the cooking fish increases their appetite even more. Their hunger grows so much that they start referring to each other as fish. Who would want to continue a dull mission when you can just be a fisherman and sell tasty fish? Benny is restless and wants to take a bite, but Ai restrains him, reminding him that they've just started cooking. While they're engrossed in conversation, they notice flocks of birds approaching from one direction, similar to how they behave before a natural disaster. These creatures catch glimpses of impending danger earlier than humans, serving as an emergency alarm. In the next scene, the ground rumbles heavily, leaving both Ai and Benny bewildered and struggling to keep up with the events unfolding. A wild beast rushes out from the waters, massive as a hill. It splashes water all around as it moves, passing by the spot where Ai and Benny are sitting. Fortunately, they narrowly avoid being crushed by the colossal beast. Ai is intrigued by the creature, but Benny is more concerned about his fish. He rushes to the cooking site only to find the flames extinguished and no sign of the cooked fish. Desperate, Benny searches for it and finally locates it. His mouth waters again. He reaches out to grasp the mouth-watering meal, but before he can do so, another person and her companions arrive on the scene. Accidentally, the newcomer steps on Benny's fish. Benny's eyes widen as if he's in shock or trauma now. The newcomer seems more interested in the beast, asking about his whereabouts. Seeing the two children, the newcomer inquires what they're doing in such a place. It's not safe for camping. Miss Ai, blushing, explains that they're on their way to Juria, the port city. The lady warns Miss Ai about the dangers of such places. Speaking of Juria, they have another full day of travel ahead before reaching there, which justifies their camping in this location. However, demons often come here to drink water, making places like this should be avoided. Miss Ai starts to wonder about the identity of this lady. She seems to be the leader of the group accompanying her. A man approaches the lady and addresses her as Miss Aya, informing her that the scouts have captured the beast and it's en route to their location. Miss Aya is relieved by this news. To boost the morale of her group, she announces an immediate party. Ai is becoming intrigued by the new group. She asks Benny to come and check out their party. However, Benny is still affected by the trauma. Cooking food from scratch is a challenging process, and it becomes even more difficult in the middle of nowhere. Bent over, with his legs on the ground and his hands holding the crushed fish, Benny is downcast. He had grown attached to the fish, and parting ways with it so soon has left him saddened. He offers a prayer for the poor fish before standing up. However, danger is on the horizon. The wild beast is charging towards the area where Miss Aya, her group, Benny, and I are present. Miss Aya's men ask if they should help her take it down, but she declines their kind offer. She readies her bow, confident that she can handle the beast herself. She aims for the charging beast and hits the bullseye. The beast falls, but due to its momentum, it loses balance and starts to tumble through the air due to its massive size. To make matters worse, the beast is tumbling toward Miss Aya. However, she remains unfazed. She draws her dagger and cleanly slices the massive demon into two parts. Both I and Benny are impressed by Miss Aya's formidable skills. They look at each other and question the nature of her weapon. Is it magical? And did Miss Aya just use magic? Miss Aka has invited the two youngsters to her campsite. The sun is going down, creating beautiful scenes. Miss Aya expresses her gratitude and thanks Miss Aka. However, she also mentions that Miss Aka didn't really have to invite them to her spot. Benny, being himself, is entirely focused on eating. Miss Aka chuckles at A's compliments and introduces herself as a member of Free Company. This Free Company's purpose is to protect common people from danger. It's a noble virtue indeed. However, Miss Aka's group considers this more as a job than a virtue. They see it as their duty to protect the people. Benny takes a break from eating, food covering his mouth, and asks if protecting the people isn't the duty of soldiers. While it is, they don't always fulfill it. Children can be so innocent, unaware of how the world truly functions. Miss Aka's soldier explains this to the youngsters. People move freely for their own reasons, but they can't have soldiers guarding them all the time. Even when demons are causing havoc, soldiers often don't show up to protect the people. The man points to a corner, indicating some craftsmen who joined Miss Aka earlier and will leave once their cart is fixed. Miss Aka seems somewhat annoyed by the man's comments. She doesn't seem to want to be appreciated. Maybe she does, but she doesn't show that side. She playfully punches her man and gets slightly angry with him. She tells him to be quiet now. As Miss Aka has this small interaction with her soldier, Benny seizes the moment to ask Guy if these people seem reliable. He proposes asking this group some questions and inviting them to join their mission as volunteers. However, Miss Aya has her own questions first. She begins by asking if the power Miss Aka used to defeat the demon was magic. Miss Aka denies this, explaining that it was the power of her dagger, not magic. Miss A then asks if the red orb attached to the dagger is a shellgun. This question confuses Miss Aka a bit. How can someone so young know about alchemy? She vocalizes her thoughts to Miss I. I responds that she has only heard stories about shellchans. It's quite impressive for someone so young to possess such decent knowledge. The dagger Miss Aka uses is a tool that utilizes the mana stored in this shellgun to create a magical blade. However, since there isn't always enough mana for wizards to work with, recharging this tool can take a considerable amount of time. The soldier admires Miss Aka and tells Aya that even a regular sword is enough for her to defeat a demon, but since the dagger is convenient, they use it. Miss Aya and Benny exchange looks and communicate silently. They both have a common request for Miss Aka. Aya stands up as a sign of respect and asks if one of them could join their mission. Both Miss Aka and the soldier appear puzzled. According to what they know, the two youngsters were headed for Jiria. Since it's only a day away, they don't consider it worth their time and effort. When asked, Aya clarifies that their mission doesn't involve heading to Jiria. Perhaps they are heading north to fulfill the orders of someone very important. To accomplish this task, they require the assistance of a strong warrior. The soldier denies this, stating that her mother isn't that significant in the grand scheme of things. There seems to be a misunderstanding. Benny chuckles at how A's attempt to recruit them for their venture seems to have failed miserably. However, Miss A doesn't appear to be backing down. She stands up, revealing a certificate. This time, she presents it in the name of the Gora Kingdom and makes the same appeal. This is the will of the King of Gora, and the paper she's holding contains his royal command. All eyes are on A now. Seeing the royal command, the group realizes that the youngsters aren't just playing around. Humans are like rooms relying on other rooms to survive. Sadly, doors close on them, and they all must open these doors someday. Accepting others and being accepted by others is the only way humans can progress. These are Jin's thoughts. He's content with a single room, and by just placing a simple blanket over himself, he can feel alive. Miss Aka has the youngsters captive. She has tied Ai and Benny to a tree and demands to know why they're heading north. Aka is determined to get answers from Ai. She slaps her and repeats the question. Benny is trembling at the sight of this. Ai responds that they are going north to discover why demons have been going berserk lately. However, this doesn't satisfy Miss Aka. She slaps the poor girl once again. Miss Aka is a bit stricter with poor Ai now. She exclaims that these stubborn brats are really testing her patience. The soldier suggests that they should ask the other kid for information. In a humorous tone, he refers to Benny as a slave kid. Traumatized, Benny shouts that he doesn't know anything about the situation. Moreover, how could a servant be aware of the grand schemes of a master? The soldier approaches Benny, inspecting his hands that seem more worn than he does. Quite impressive. Miss Aka exclaims that the girl is truly remarkable. Miss Aka then starts to voice her thoughts. If the girl truly possesses the king's order, she can't be ordinary. The royals have always held the commoners in low regard. They believe everything exists solely for their benefit. Everyone else is insignificant in their eyes. The only problem is that everyone in the kingdom, including the stray dogs, views the royal king as a complete fool. Hence, there's no way such a king would care about events in the north. Miss Aka's points are clear and well illustrated. There's a valid reason for why she slapped A. Upon hearing this, Ai begins to weep. She doesn't know why she should speak. She has no idea what kind of person the king is. Furthermore, she never knew who was truly aiding them. To worsen the situation, Miss Aka sets the king's royal order on fire and plans to dispose of the youngsters after the party ends. Miss Aka has a cloth covering one of her eyes. She lost that eye and considers it the price she paid to see what she couldn't before. Perhaps that's why it hurts more than usual today. The king's order is now completely engulfed in flames. Its ashes drift in the winds of Maria's despair. Aka draws her dagger. However, before she can deal with the youngsters, one of her men rushes in, gasping. He exclaims that a demon is headed straight their way. Miss Aka sees the matter of the youngsters as more urgent and states that she will address the demon after dealing with them. But there's something extraordinary about this demon. It's so massive that its mere presence obscures the shining moon. The soldier asks Miss Aka if she has ever seen a demon this colossal. Regrettably, she has seen such a demon before. It's the formidable demon whose attacks can cleave the skies in two. The Lord of the Wall, the mighty master of Griya of the Wandering Blade. Those are the names attributed to this demon. Furthermore, Miss Aka wonders why Kaltovia of the Dusk has ventured so far south from the north. Now, even Miss Aka acknowledges this threat. However, before they can act, the helpless Maria exclaims that Miss Aka's crew cannot face that demon alone. She claims to have vanquished Griya of the Wandering Blade before and asserts herself as the only one capable of defeating it. Yutaba appears again, seated in a room with his computer by his side. He's in the real world, not the fantastical world that Miss A inhabits. A red stone glows in his room as he's about to reveal his perverted nature by licking a figurine of a girl in his room to make up for lost time. Seemingly, the stone has teleported him from the real world into the fantasy world. Miss Aka is somewhat confused about A's previous comments. A's statement seems unrealistic to anyone new who doesn't recognize her, so she seeks clarification by asking a question. A confirms her claim with a simple yes. According to her, she has indeed defeated Griya of the Wandering Blade in the past. Benny tries to offer more information about A, but his statement remains incomplete. Right after A's response, Aka grabs her mouth and slams her against a tree. All of this appears to be a joke to Aka. How could someone as seemingly vulnerable as I defeat Griya of the Wandering Blade? Moreover, if I truly has defeated such a legendary demon, how did she end up tied to a tree? Aka proceeds to question I further. Does she believe it's enough to deceive someone like Aka? Does A truly think that Aka would release her if she said so? Did she genuinely think that the appearance of the demon would be their ticket out of this situation? Aka poses all these questions to I and demands answers. Unfortunately, it's all a misunderstanding. I is in a dire state now, both emotionally and physically. Blood flows from her mouth and tears stream down her face as she explains that her statement wasn't meant to be taken literally. However, before I can elaborate, the soldier interjects. He explains that the people living in the village beyond the campsite are mostly family or friends of their free company. While it might not matter to I and Benny, for the soldiers, what's at stake goes beyond just their lives. The soldier then tells his captain that this situation isn't worth their time right now. They have bigger concerns to deal with at the moment, so he suggests that they simply slit the throats of the youngsters and focus on facing the demon. However, Aka changes her mind. She informs A that she won't kill them immediately. Instead, they will confront the demon first. If Aka returns after battling the demon, she will then proceed to kill I and Benny. But if Aka dies in the fight, both of them will be spared since there won't be anyone left to threaten their lives. Before leaving, Miss Aka does something even more reckless to I. She uses her dagger to gouge out A's eyes. The poor girl screams in pain and agony. Aka explains that this is a gift from her. She hasn't actually taken A's eyes, but rather, she intends to give her an eye that can see what can't normally be seen. Concerned for I, Benny comes up with a bold plan. With the onlookers gone, he rubs his shoes against the ground until they're worn out, then uses them to cut the ropes binding him. He proceeds to climb the log he's tied to, quickly freeing himself. He rushes over to I, asking if she's okay. The pain and suffering they're enduring is overwhelming. No youngsters should witness such things during the most precious moments of their lives. Benny then frees A and, crying, suggests that they give up the lost cause. The mission seemed impossible to Benny from the very beginning. He exclaims that they can't even take on regular people. Their luck held out that it was mercenaries who captured them. Had it been thieves, they'd likely already be dead. Benny now wants to return to the king and inform him of their mission's failure. Alternatively, they could go somewhere else and live in hiding. Since Miss Aka and her men are preoccupied with the demon, Benny believes that he and I can make a successful escape. Regarding the king, he might assume they perished in the north. However, I isn't deterred by the increasing dangers. She's filled with determination. she asks Benny to recall what he had once told her. A wild animal never dreams of being kept as livestock. Livestock always envy the freedom of animals outside. They dream of going beyond, of leaping over the fence. Like livestock, this is the cost I must pay for crossing the fence without proper preparation. Benny insists on giving up, asserting that they aren't ready yet. But Ai responds by stating that she's the only one unprepared. A spirit as powerful as Lord Jin answered her summoning. However, as a summoner, she considers herself weak and inadequate. They haven't achieved much so far. Benny stands up. Seeing that Ai is in no condition to fight and yet still determined to do so, Benny suggests that he should help Ai get patched up. They might lack money, but they'll find a way. Ai is in agony. The demon came because she destroyed Gria. She can't allow others to die due to her actions. Saying this, she gestures as if summoning someone. She's resolute to become the summoner worthy of Lord Jin. Fortunately, her summoning succeeds this time. Jin is summoned from the real world into this fantasy realm. Yet there's a minor issue. He was busy doing something meant to be private. As he enters the fantasy world, a figurine he was licking transforms into Emily Chan. Now that Emily has a physical form, she slaps Jin. Because of him, she's covered in saliva and smells awful. Benny is embarrassed by the sight. To him, it's the sweet scent of happiness. Jin reaches out to Emily, calling her name, not wanting to let her go. However, Emily becomes angry, telling the pervert to stay away from her. Sadly for Jin, Emily Chan flees the scene. Jin has his own problems to contend with. He's also in significant distress. However, there's perhaps no one in this world who can truly understand his situation. He never anticipated that this would happen to him. He never expected a beloved character to come to life. Such occurrences are common in anime, but it's Jin's first experience with it. He berates himself for being so careless and letting go of Emily. Nevertheless, it's over now, and he resigns himself to his pain, bowing emotionally. Benny approaches Jin and apologizes for the interruption. Jin also realizes that he has been summoned into this world. He playfully addresses Benny as slave number 1, but Benny smiles and corrects him, saying his name is Benny, not slave number 1. Then Jin turns his attention to Ai and addresses her as Annie Chan. He's concerned for her and asks what happened to her. Benny explains that her eye was stabbed and she's been badly beaten as well. Ai, however, reassures everyone that she's okay. She then asks Jin for his help regarding the demon. Jin gently holds Ai in his arms and gives her a few light taps, appearing somewhat angry. He scolds her for not summoning him earlier as she was in such trouble. Ai apologizes to Lord Jin, feeling so helpless and considering herself weak. Due to this feeling, she believes summoning Lord Jin would only burden him. Jin also has his own life and Ai is fully aware of that. She doesn't want to constantly interfere with him for her own problems. However, Jin admires Ai. She has become the dearest and most important person to him. He assures her that she isn't weak. She possesses enormous potential. His words lift Ai's spirits, and now that she's with someone who cares for her, she begins to cry uncontrollably, like a child. Her eye might be causing her discomfort. Jin notices and retrieves a bandage from his feet. He unwraps it, though Ai is slightly repulsed by the sight, as it also contains some of Jin's foot hairs. Jin instructs Benny to hold her steady, continuing to refer to him as a slave. He gently applies the bandage to Ai's eye, and a magical glow appears, healing her eye. Surprisingly, simple items from the real world seem to have a magical effect in this fantasy realm. Meanwhile, the demon continues to wreak havoc and chaos across the land. Miss Aika's men are struggling to restrain it, realizing that it's far beyond their capabilities. The demon's frenzied speed is impossible to match. They attempt to employ long-range weapons, but they prove ineffective against it. Aika commands 2 of her men to mount horses and alert nearby villages. She assigns the rest of her men to assist the villagers in escaping. A soldier who seems particularly close to Miss Aika expresses concern, not wanting her to go alone. However, Miss Aika exhibits remarkable resolve. She's not an ordinary lady armed with a dagger. She's someone who survived the North. She remarks that the men should only worry about their own safety. Following their captain's orders, the men head towards the villages. As they leave the battlefield, they are all concerned about Miss Aika. They hope she returns safely. Aika had already used up the mana in her dagger earlier in the day. If she had known what was going to transpire, she would have conserved it. She's unsure how much mana has been restored, but she knows she must utilize every bit of it in a single strike. The outcome hinges on this blow. If successful, she stands a chance of defeating the monstrous demon and surviving. However, if the dagger fails her, her chances of survival are bleak. Unfortunately, the strike barely leaves a scratch on the beast. Nonetheless, it captures the demon's attention. Aika lifts her head to observe the colossal demon before her. She identifies it as the Lord of the Wall, once the commander of countless followers. The battles fought against it at the wall as the sun set all ended in the demon's triumph. Eika is left questioning why he has come here now. With the dagger in hand, she charges toward the demon. She attempts another strike, but her mana is too depleted, insufficient to harm the demon. She needs more time, yet her condition allows her only the tiniest fraction of a millisecond. The demon raises its sword high, preparing to unleash havoc upon Eika. A single strike and Eika would be no more. However, before this fate can befall her, Jin rushes from behind and stands by Eika's side. Seeing him, she is bewildered. An eye-patched character is a rarity, something not commonly seen in the real world. Eika is a bit confused, though. How can someone be so exhilarated in such a dire situation? The circumstance warrants worry, but Jin appears as if he's experiencing the best day of his life. The demon's sword slices through the air, rapidly closing the distance between it, Eika and Jin. Yet despite having a sword hanging above his head, Jin is smiling, perhaps even laughing heartily with his mouth wide open, as he gives Eika a thumbs up. By the sheer power of the sword's swing, it is enveloped in lightning. This strike holds the potential to rend the skies asunder, while the wind pressure it generates could send anything hurtling away. Miraculously, Miss Eika is still standing. How? She was certain the sword was moments away from her and had braced herself for the end. So why is she still alive? Amidst her multitude of questions, she witnesses Jin soaring through the air. It appears Jin took the blow upon himself, saving Miss Eika from certain death. However, Jin himself is now airborne, or rather, he's been flung into the air. Lacking wings like a bird, Jin can't maintain his flight and plummets back to the ground like a projectile crashing upon landing. The situation is spiraling out of control for Eika. She's left wondering how he absorbed Kaltovia's attack on his own. Why did he take it? And most crucially, how did he survive? Meanwhile, Ai and Benny hurry toward Jin, who managed to land clumsily after absorbing the massive impact of the demon's attack. Eika, however, is taken aback by the presence of the two youngsters. She had tied them to a log, confident they wouldn't escape. Furthermore, she had stabbed Ai's eye. Then why is Ai standing before her with two eyes? Ai quickly acknowledges that there isn't time to explain the situation. Benny, referred to as servant number 1 by Jin, is mournful. Seeing Jin on the ground, he assumes Jin has passed into the afterlife. Ai, however, rebukes Benny's assumption, asserting that Jin isn't dead. When summoned spirits sustain enough damage, they simply return to their original worlds, rendering them immortal in the summoned world. Nonetheless, the impact still took its toll. Jin rises with a wince, declaring that he's far from okay. The impact hurt more than the time when the neighborhood bully beat him up and took his money. As for Eika, she's in disbelief. Ai reveals that Jin is the strongest summoned spirit, the same one who previously defeated Gria of the Wandering Blade. The four individuals engage in a lighthearted conversation, though the timing could be worse. Benny directs their attention to something requiring immediate attention. The demon seems different. His eye gleams with a fiery red, and it charges up for another strike with its majestic sword. Jin urges the others to step back, confident that his body can withstand the demon's blows without harm. Furthermore, he's come prepared this time. He retrieves a laser from his pocket and aims it directly at the demon. Jin leaps high, aiming for the demon. Unfortunately, he misses his mark. Instead of damaging the demon, the laser travels through space for millions of miles before striking a planet, tearing it to pieces with a resounding explosion. Benny gazes upward, pondering if it was magic that Lord Jin had just employed. Miss Eika and Miss Ai, however, are looking in the opposite direction. Hovering in the air, Jin now maintains better control. The demon not only evaded Jin's laser, but also managed to land a blow on him. Even a body as powerful as Lord Jin's isn't impervious to pain. Nonetheless, the laser did succeed in creating a significant hole in the mad demon's cloak. Jin possesses other tools at his disposal. It appears he can only use items from the real world once, but their effects are magnified hundreds of times in this realm. He retrieves a lighter, referring to it as Father's Lighter Number 2. Facing the massive demon, he regrets not having brought a few batteries along. Yet lacking them, he must make the best use of the tools he has left. The demon strikes Lord Jin once more, causing him pain, but he can't afford to waste time. Igniting his lighter, he swings it forward, creating a colossal flame in the shape of a sword that hurtles toward the demon. This time, Jin is confident it will connect, for the demon has limited space to evade. The demon, however, counters it with his own sword. Strike number 2 by Lord Jin is also evaded. Jin attempts to activate the lighter once again, but regrettably, it's out of fuel. The demon swings his sword, delivering another blow to Jin's shoulder. Night's shadow blankets the battlefield. The demon shows no sign of relenting. One after another, he strikes at Jin, eager to dispatch him swiftly and continue spreading chaos and havoc across the land. This time, as Jin is grounded, the demons strike tears into the earth, hurling countless stones into the air. It's as if stones are raining down from the sky. Miss Aka, and Benny shield their heads with crossed arms. Before Lord Jin can rise, the demon launches another attack against him. He wields his sword with an intensity that suggests there's no tomorrow. Given his history of endless battles and victories, his determination is understandable. On the battlefield, there's no time to spare if one desires victory. As for Miss Aka, and Benny, they're now making their escape from the battlefield. Staying here would mean certain death. Benny is the first to flee, but Ai remains steadfast, ignoring Aka's warning that death awaits her. The chaos caused by the Dark Knight has even brought down someone as strong as Jin. He's lying on the ground, holding onto it like he's afraid of dying. He looks like he's in a lot of pain. He's struggling to breathe and wondering why he's hurting so much. Even though he can't really die in this world, he's thinking maybe it's better than being in so much pain. He's confused and doesn't know why he's here on the battlefield or why he's even trying to fight. Ai is worried about Jin's condition. She carefully goes down to where he is. Miss Aka is worried and tells her not to, but Ai doesn't change her mind. She goes to Jin and asks if he's okay. He's not. After getting attacked by the strong enemy, he's hurt. Jin manages to sit up a little even though he's struggling. He says he used things from his world to get stronger, but now he doesn't have any left. He's losing hope, but Ai still thinks they can win somehow. She believes that both she and Jin might have hidden powers that can help them win. They just don't know how to use them. Jin stands up and says sorry Ai for not being able to help her. Ai says his name like she knows things are tough. While this is happening, the Dark Knight is getting ready to do a really strong move. Miss Aka sees it first and warns everyone. It's a move called Kaltovia's Lance, and it can make everything go up in flames with one hit. It's really scary. Even though the lance has hurt a lot of people, Ai, Lord Jin, and their friends are still standing. But they're losing hope. Lord Jin tells Ai they should think about leaving this time. He knows he got powerful when he came here, but he doesn't really understand how. However, Jin really wants to survive. He knows it's good to have a second chance in a new world with cool abilities. He doesn't want to give up, so he gets strong again and stands up. He wants to win this time because if he doesn't, it might change how he looks at life. Jin's strong beliefs are really impressive, and Ai wants to show that. But Jin doesn't really get why she's acting this way. Still, she goes to Miss Aka and asks about something important. Miss Aka doesn't understand at first and gets a bit upset. The situation is really urgent. They could all be burned by the lance's flames any moment now. Even though Miss Aka doesn't fully trust A because of who she works for, what A says seems real. Ai tells her that just like Miss Aka and her Groot fought bravely to save others, Ai wants to help someone she cares about. Miss Aka gets it a bit and gives the thing I asked for, although she's not very happy about it. Ai takes it as a good sign and says thanks, but they don't have much time, so she hurries to Jin, gives him the thing, and explains how it works. She tells him that it's not just about the special thing they brought from their world. They can also use the power from their own world. While Ai talks to Jin, the Dark Knight is preparing to pull his strongest move. Miss Aka tells them it's really dangerous, and they could all be turned to ashes, but Ai keeps talking to Jin about using magic. She explains how magic needs special words, imagination, and a power source. The thing I gave Jin can hold power, and she thinks if Jin imagines the power from his world, he might be able to use it to survive this bad situation. The Dark Knight's chanting of magic reaches its peak. Fueled by strong anger and holding a spear on fire, he dives towards the ground with the purpose of setting everything in his path on fire. The air itself carries the burning heat from the spear. At this moment, the fiery shine of the spear looks like the sun, giving off light and scorching heat. But unlike the harmless sunlight, this spear could cause a lot of damage and disorder to the land unless they act quickly to save themselves. Interestingly, the quick lesson Ai gave Jin seems to have struck a chord with him. In this short time, he has learned something. Yet maybe the lesson alone didn't push him to do better. Jin, an ordinary person used to the real world, had always dreamed of holding a real dagger. And now that dream has come true. Not a fake dagger, but the real thing. With a little push from his own leg, Jin moves forward. He's excited as he steps into a world of imagination where anything can happen. Holding the dagger tightly, Jin calls upon the energy from his own world. Everyone is surprised to see so much energy going into the blade. Even though the Dark Knight is charging towards him, Jin stands strong like he's not afraid of the coming attack. His new confidence shows that he's discovering his own potential. As the flames from the fire start surrounding them, small rocks get swept up by the strong winds made by the fire and wind crashing together. But Jin doesn't give up. He pushes the dagger into the fire and he smiles in a mysterious way. The special blade and his own hidden power could be the answer to their problem. The blade Jin holds can go through space. He uses this amazing tool to fight the flames, and it seems like the flames change direction just because of the blade. In one move, the Dark Knight starts breaking apart from his powerful spirit, even the smallest part of him. Jin realizes that his life in the real world was not very exciting, but now he has a second chance in this different world, and he wants to see if he can do something important. He wants to protect and save the people he cares about in this new place. It is a bright day with white clouds scattered across the blue sky. The remains of a dark house stand against the blue hills. With a rustle, Jin Kyung sits up in bed. He stretches and cracks his back, complaining about how uncomfortable the bed was. How did the people in this fantasy world even sleep in beds such as these? He gets out of bed, wondering to himself if I had slept well. He walks barefooted on the wooden floor and with a loud creak, opens the door. Bright light pours in. Jin blinks against the light and gazes upon the view in front of him. Houses lay destroyed and injured people are being helped. There is smoke still rising from the destruction where fires must have been. He sees a soldier digging a grave and another half carries and half drives the dead to their final resting place. In the graveyard, the dead have just been laid to rest in their final resting place and families of the bereaved stand around the graves, mourning them. As Jin looks upon the view unfolding before him, he realizes that fantasy world and anime and games that he found so exciting was not really just like that. Any monster attacks or war resulted in the loss of lives of countless people. He muses to himself that this destruction is scary as countless people lose their lives. He looks down at the destruction and then hears Eika's voice. Eika and Ai stand underneath the balcony where Jin stands as Eika apologizes to Ai and admits that Ai can be trustworthy. Ai looks at Eika and she vocalizes her thoughts, letting Ai know about what she really thinks about the king and his plans. There was no way to know what the king was planning, but he might be taking advantage of Ai right then. Jin looks down upon the two and eavesdrops on their conversation. Ai says she knows what Eika is worried about, and admits that she realized certain things and would be checking for herself. Eika looks down at Ai as Ai says she wants to see what is going on here in the north, and that once she knows, she will do what she believes is the right thing. Eika is quiet for a moment as Ai thinks out loud for herself. She looks at the blue sky, thinking out loud that there was nothing more dangerous than the right thing. She gazes at the sky. The trees in front of her are dark against the bright and blue sky. The silhouettes of a group of people stand stark against the view of the mountains. In the background, the mountains are high, and in the foreground lurks the hints of a forest. Eika hands a small pouch to Ai, telling her to use it on her travels. Ai, in turn, thanks her, telling her she will use it well. Benny is surprised at the money that Eika has given to Ai. Eika looks uncomfortable for a moment, apologizing about the royal command as well, and then scratching her cheek, saying there was another thing. The five people look at one another as Eika says that all the news they knew had been told by bards. Bards were not the source of information for just them, but they were a medium of news for everyone. It was because bards traveled far and wide. Eika explains that the bards travel a lot, and due to that, they get to hear and see a lot of things. That is how news of the things and problems happening around the world was going out through their songs. Everything that the bards heard, they put into a song that they would then sing to people. They would sit around a fire making and singing their songs. Since the group would be traveling, and during their travels they would reach Jiria, Eika advises them, telling them they can hear news if they go to the Bard's Hall at Jiria. She tells them that the news they hear might be important. Eika unbuckles her scythe and throws it towards Jin Kyung as a parting gift and tells him to take care of the Ai. Pleasantly surprised, Jin immediately dons the sheath and the scythe, looking for appreciation but gets none. Bidding the group farewell, Jin, Ai, and Benny set out on the long journey they have ahead. As the three walk on toward their destination, there is shock and surprise. Jin finds out that Ai had been stabbed by Eika, and he is adamant that he would have taken some sort of action against that, but Ai clarifies that it was only a misunderstanding. Ai then tells him that Eika has a lot of people to protect, so that is why she was so much more sensitive. She goes on and tells the other two that she learned a lot because of Eika, such as how to be sure about one's choices and responsibilities. Jin looks at her. Ai muses that becoming a mature adult starts with looking at one's surroundings, at which Jin is surprised. The hills stretch far and wide in front of them, with dark mountains over the horizon and endless blue sky towering above them all. In the distance stands the nobility's castle, gleaming under the sun's rays. In the castle, the nobleman and Elira meet as they look at each other with disbelief. In the mansion, the man appears before nobility. The man remarks upon the state of Gorha, saying it is going through some difficult times. It was only natural to discuss the matters of the state. The nobleman tells the other that his daughter met with him earlier in the morning, and she told him things that might be of interest to the two of them. She told him that the summoner and her group had left for the north that day, and that he had been told that they had defeated Gria of the Wandering Blade. The man is surprised. As he puts his tea down on the table with clink, he says that the rumors he heard were true. There is disbelief in his voice. Upon questioning, the man elaborates that the Bards Association had informed him that people had witnessed something strange. He tells him that he had heard that Kaltovia of the Dusk had appeared and had been destroyed. The two noblemen are silent. Then the nobleman is asked what would happen if a person who was that strong turned to someplace else and muses about how worrying it is. The conversation continues that the expedition would be passing through Jiraiya on their way to the north, and that the residents had fled from the city for fear of the demon invasion, despite the city being such an important port city. There is concern that someone will need to go to the city and inform the bards and warn them that this will be happening soon. After all, no one knows what accidents might befall them in a ruined city. In a clearing in the forest sit a group of bards around a fire. Their leader tells them about an opportunity that they have been given from higher-ups. One of pays no heed to the mission and instead asks them what about their performance that was due tonight. At this, the leader of the troop snaps and asks them who cares about a stupid performance. Just how long were they thinking of planning to live off performances and the few coins that were thrown at them during the show? He urges them that they needed to be sponsored by the nobleman if they wanted to live in comfort, and that they did not lack anything. He then goes on to hype up his own performers. He speaks about the abilities of every single one of his performers, claiming that they needed to be sponsored by a nobleman. Since Kiner had such good high notes, Eric had great technique and Lua was pretty. He is met with shyness from all except Lua, who reprimands him over his comments to him. After being scolded by Lua, the leader remarks that two people will be arriving from Jiraiya, and they were really wicked. He asks his troop who they were. The best performers in Jiraiya. His group agrees with him that are a big deal in Jiraiya. The group lead then goes on to remark that the two people he had shown were dangerous, and that is why these two people, according to him, needed to be taken care of. The members are startled and start questioning him. He plops down a pouch of money after the outburst from his group members. Eric, Kiner, and Lua look at the pouch full of money he had just presented to them and are surprised at how much money there was. The group leader clarifies that it is not murder if it is for the good of the country. He claims that the mission is for the country and must be undertaken. The mission is for the good of the country. He goes on to motivate his members, asking them if they became bards simply to sing songs. Did they not want to sing to spread the truth across the world? He thinks back about the song they made about the king being a degenerate and how the group had sung with their lives on the line and had nothing left to be afraid of. In the bleak of the night, the hut sits in the middle of the forest floor with light peeking out as the troop leader's voice comes out, asking who would be willing to do the deed. In Lua's hand is the pouch of money as he walks down the forest floor. The money sits in his hand in a tight grasp. He sighs as he walks, musing to himself. In his head, the words that had been spoken in that hut play around on repeat about how he need not sing in the streets forever and how he hates being poor. He tells himself that it is right that he cannot keep singing in the streets forever, that he wants to be invited to a huge mansion as well and perform there, and how sick he was of being poor. He opens the door to a yard as walk on. He opened the door of a dimly lit house with a loud creak. As he walks in, he is immediately hit on the legs with a stick. Her mother scolds him. She yells at him, demanding he tell her where he had been all this time, and how she had told time and again Lua to stop wasting his time singing. Lua looks at his mother in frustration as his mother yells at him, telling him she cannot even look at the other villagers since Lua only lies around and sings and then goes on to beg others for money. His brothers and sisters look at the scene in front of him as Lua's mother scolds him to ask him if he was even ashamed to look at his brothers and sisters. She draws a comparison, telling him how Hans from down the road had become a blacksmith and everyone else was moving forward in life except for Lua. Lua is crying and sniffling, and he stands there listening to his mother. Suddenly, he yells that his mother doesn't understand how he feels. He runs off, slamming the door behind him with a bang, leaving everyone behind him to look at the closed door in shock. His mother is in disbelief as she yells for him to get back. Lua yells that he hates her and then disappears into the thick of the night. As Lua runs as fast as his strength can muster, he thinks to himself about how he will succeed. He is sure that he will be successful and come back proudly. Under the dark and starry sky, Jin, Ai, and Benny are crossing the forest. They are tired from their journey as Ai is huffing and panting as she talks. Jin asks her if she is okay. Ai responds that she is and asks about Jin. He says he is full of energy. This is met by confusion as Ai says he used to get tired even after running a little bit. Jin agrees with her and says it is indeed weird that he feels fine. He wonders if his body had started to understand how to use mana now, which must explain why he is not feeling tired anymore. Since Jiraiya is near the sea, Benny wonders how much further they have to go and asks Jin if he has seen the sea before, and he is surprised when he realizes Ai and Benny had not. He then goes on to tell them with a smirk no less that the sea is where there is a lot of water as far as the eye can see, and then goes on to say that the sea is where the water is connected to the sky. To himself, he wonders why he had never been to the beach. They continue walking on despite their exhaustion and arrive at a site. As they walk on, they are met with a beautiful sight that awes them and makes them wonder if that were the sea. They look upon the sight, mouths open. The sight in front of them is full of endless blue with scattered white clouds. They stand in front of a huge mountain, and near the mountains is a huge body of water that rumbles. Aizen comments on how the water and the sky really are connected, like Jin said. As they gaze up at the water, Benny wonders how boats can even float up there. As they stand there looking upon the beautiful sight in front of them, they are distracted by a loud roar. They are startled and panic if that was the sound of the demon. I asked if they should check it out, while Jin suggests that they should just run away. The three are in a state of panic and flurry. There is a moment of silence since they cannot decide on what to do. A moment later, Jin starts running away, telling I and Benny they can stay behind if they felt like it. A huge demon-like monster roars and towers over the cowering figure of Lua as he falls to the ground. Scared and confused, Lua looks at the monster, dazed and wondering what was even happening to him. With a deafening roar, the monster raises its sting to strike Lua. Lua wonders why he even agreed to do this job and why can he not do anything right. He closes his eyes and the sting comes down faster than he can see, and then suddenly there is a cry. Then Lua hears footsteps coming towards him. A figure appears and yells at the monster. The figure seems like a crazy person to Lua, asking the monster how it can attack a defenseless woman and that two one-on-one. The figure runs and jumps up in the air and challenges the monster to a fight, yelling at it that they should have a fair fight with 4 people against the one monster demon. Behind him run 2 more people that seem to be in a state of panic. One of them yells and asks the guide who seemed to be challenging the monster if she was fighting too. With a whoosh, the figure had jumped up in the air and now he was coming back down to the ground, troubling to pull his weapon out as the 4 onlookers look at him quizzically. Even the monster was confused for a moment. One of the girls who was with the man yells at him, telling him she had told him he would be unable to reach it. As the monster gets ready to strike again, the young man calls for a timeout. Who does that? As the sting of the monster coming crashing down onto the young man, suddenly the monster is thrown back with a force and a loud thwack and an even bigger kaboom. The monster is slammed against the edge of a huge boulder and everyone looks at the result in surprise. Lua is surprised, looking at the man and wondering who that loser was. With another loud roar, the demon rises again. Everyone is immediately sent into a state of panic. Ak calls to the girl to run away from the demon. She then calls out to Jin. The girl calls out to the god of death to use his powerful scythe to punish the creature. I and Benny look at her with disbelief and something that resembles disgust. In the background, the sky is dark and there is a thunder. A figure appears in the dark and there is a flash of blue light. With a rumble, Jin appears, and to the surprise of the 3 people watching, this time when he attacks the creature, it is with speed and power. He runs at the creature with full speed, and as Egg, Benny, and the girl they had just rescued look at the scene unfolding before their very eyes, Jin attacks the massive being. There are rumbles and cracks as slashes appear on the reptilian body of the huge being. Loud cracks are heard. There is silence before cracks appear in a creature's side. A rumble is heard as the upper body of the creature is blasted away from its hind. Only the legs of the creature remain as pieces of its body are splattered everywhere. The girl stares at the scene in front of with shock, mouth open. As I and Benny collect themselves, Jin walks towards the girl. As he looks at the 3 people, Lua realizes that these were the people from the leaflets. These were dangerous people. Jin walks up to Lua and asks him flirtatiously if he was okay. Skeptical about how dangerous he is, Lua tells him he is fine and thanks him for his help. There is silence as Jin stands in front of Lua and looks at him quizzically. I and Benny also stare at the 2. After a moment passes, Lua asks them if something is wrong. At this, Jin is encouraged to ask Lua why his voice was so deep. Lua laughs and informs Jin that his voice is not deep for a guy. Through this, the group is silent. As they walk away from the remains of the monster, the group is talking and they find out that Lua is a bard. Lua asks the group if this was their first time in Jiria. Once it is confirmed that it is indeed their first time in Jiria, and then that they had some business in Jiria. Lua then goes on to inquire if they had a place to stay. If they had no place to stay, says Lua, they could come and stay at the Bard's Hall. He would like to repay them for saving him. I thanks Lua profusely. I then turns happily to Jin and tells him they had a place to stay. Jin does not respond. Instead, he sighs, showing his frustration, and then he turns to Lua and asks him why his hair is so damn long. A protests against the question and tries to scold Jin, while Lua apologizes and says his troop had told him to grow it out. Jin then displays his frustration verbally, and Lua then has to apologize to Jin for being the guy as I stares at Jin in disbelief. Jin gazes at the sky as he says it is fine, and that his world has a saying. The wind whips his hair away and announces, who cares if they are a man or a woman? They just need to taste good. Ai, Lua, and Benny are confused and shocked. Benny even seems embarrassed as Jin simply tells them that they should go. As they move forward, Lua thinks to himself about how dangerous these people are, convincing himself that they really are very dangerous. The sun is setting when Jin, Lua, Ai, and Benny reach a building that seems to be in ruins. As they walk forward, Jin asks Lua if that was the Bard's Hall. He then comments that he loves the view and goes on to say that it is very open. Lua apologizes as he explains that even though he knew that the Bard's Hall had been attacked by demons, he had never thought that it would have ended up like this. Jin, to make him feel better, tells him that he knows that if Lua had known this had happened, he wouldn't have invited them so confidently to the hall. Benny comments that the Bard's Hall is very nice and that it is very interesting that they could sleep on a road that looked like a house. Lua tells them that they also had a dining hall that could be used as a dining hall which will be usable once it is cleaned up a little bit. Immediately, Ai rolls up her sleeves, asking Lua to let them help him. As Benny looks at her in disbelief and Jin motions for Lua to say no. Lua refuses Ai's help, saying it was a Bard's Hall, so it would be a Bard's duty to clean it up. Benny then urges Ai that it would be a better idea if they looked for boats before the sun went down, to which Ai says that given the state of the village, it hardly seemed likely that there would be any people. Benny goes as far as to say they might have to travel by land, at which Ai is alarmed. Jin pipes in that he can help with monsters and demons, but based on the map, it looked as if it would take them much longer to go by land. Benny nods, agreeing with Jin. Lua then encourages them to go ahead and have a look. Ai gives in, agreeing to go with the other two and looking for a boat that would take them out of the city. As the Jin, Ai, and Benny walks away in the sunset and their silhouettes fades into the background, Lua stands in the rays of the setting sun. He heaves a sigh of relief. He raises his clenched fist and looks at it. And then he unclenches his fist to reveal a small bottle hidden there. In the dark of the forest, two people walk away from a small hut. It is Eric and Kiner. Inside the dimly lit hut, Lua listens to the group leader explain what he had in mind. As Lua looks on, the leader shows him the small bottle and tells him that he does not need to kill the people himself. He only needs to use the potion. The bottle, he says, is only good enough to knock out a bear, and that he was told a member of the Alchemists Association would come and finish the job as soon as they are asleep. He tells Lua this is their one chance to make some real money, and that they will be paid twice as much after all of this is over. He tries to convince Lua, even asking him what a man from the beaches had to be afraid of, to which Lua tells him he is not actually from Jiria. He points to a crudely drawn picture of Jin and says, since he is a spirit, what would happen if the potion did not work on him? Lua locks eyes with the leader. His gaze is dark. If that happens, the steam fades out to bring in the night sky. Three people stand underneath it. Benny gazes at the view, saying it seemed as if there were still a few houses with people in them, asking if the demon that attacked them could be Kaltovia. Given the demon's height, could have easily crossed the water. At this observance, A starts musing that demons had never attacked from the water before, and it might be because, like she had heard, that Jiria had been named after the goddess of the sea, Aya, and that's why Jiria's waters are protected by Aya's blessing. At this, Jin bursts out laughing. When Ai and Benny look at him, he calls them silly fantasy people, and says he needs to give them a little science lesson. He asks them if they had ever seen a god before, and both shake their heads. He then asked if anything they had prayed or wished for ever been granted. Ai and Benny once again shake their head no. Jin then asks them if their gods ask them to pay them at churches and temples, and it clarifies that they tend to donate money and other valuables. Jin cuts her off, exclaiming that it made no sense that an omnipotent god could not even make any money, and that these lies were made by people so they could scam other people for their money, and that there was no such thing as a god. Ai and Benny look at him, really confused and wondering if there still is a god. In a dark and dreary night, there is a sound. Amongst the wreckage of the ships, Jin, Ai, and Benny roams. Benny asks Ai what they should do when suddenly she is startled and exclaims that she sees a light. In the distance shines a small light, and the air rings with the clanking of the hammers. Ai, Jin, and Benny run towards the man who is working on a boat. Benny remarks that the boat is intact. The man turns to look at them. Ai asks the man if this boat is his and looks at him pleadingly. The man looks at her, ignores her, and then goes back to working on his boat. Suddenly, there is a light and a voice asking who was there and saying that the old man cannot talk. Jin, Ai, and Benny turns towards the sound of the voice. Benny steps forward to clarify that they are looking for a boat and asks the man if the boat is usable. The man who had appeared carrying a lantern says the old man had fixed all the broken bits, but that was not the problem. Benny then asks him what the problem was. The man goes on to say that the sea was the problem, and that they needed to get the boat out when the tide is low, but that was not happening, and that it sounded as if Lady Aya was mad, and that their prayers were not being answered. The young man then directs the old man, asking him if the boat should work when the tide is low. The old man gives a signal that confirms the answer. Once they are back at the Bard's Hall, Jin, Ai, and Benny are surprised by a meal prepared by Lua. He welcomes them all and presents them with a warm fire and a bed and tells them he prepared a meal for them as well. Lua is dressed in a manner that seems to annoy Jin as he tells him to cover himself up. As they eat the meal prepared by Lua, Jin pesters him about the clothes he wears during performances and Lua apologizes. Ai compliments the food Lua has prepared and tells him it is delicious. Lua then tells her he will get something for them to drink. As he walks away, Benny decides to ask Ai what they should do since they would need to take the land route at this rate, but they will also need to take several detours which will not be good for the journey. Lua looks at them unamused by the job he is doing. Benny and Ai talk about how Jin got rid of the demons in Gorha, but if they attack again, while they are taking the long way around, then they will be in trouble. It is at this moment that Lua presents them with a potion he claims is delicious. He then sweats and nervously corrects himself, saying it was tea and stammering, asking them to try it out. Jin, Ai, and Benny take the drinks and thank Lua, saying it sounded delicious. Ai stops Lua and asks him if he knows anything about tides. Ai looks down carefully as she says that Aya, the goddess of the sea, was not opening up the way to leave, and that they needed to take the boat out, but since the tide was so high, they could not do that. Upon hearing this, Lua remarks that he has heard a legend about the bards and Aya. He tells them it was the reason the Bard's Hall was built in Jiria. The goddess of the sea was originally on the demon's side. It was because the demons would sing beautiful songs to lure people towards them. Once the people found out that the goddess of the sea loved songs, they gathered the bards to create some of the most beautiful songs in the world so they could get the goddess of the sea on their side. They gave the songs to the goddess of the sea as a tribute, and in turn she gave them her blessing. To bless the people, the tide was high at night, so that the people would be protected from the demons, and it was low during the day to help the fishermen fish at sea, away from the shore. Ai seems touched by the story, while Jin is not even fazed. He tells her it was not the time to be amazed by such stories, since nothing of what Lua had said was true, and that Lua did not have a way to make the tide go down. Lua interjects, saying that Aya selects the bard with the most beautiful voice, and that if that bard offers Aya with a song, she would be likely to help. As Jin jokes around, Lua feels disappointed that he told them all he knew in spur of the moment, but they were not even drinking the potion he had brought them. Suddenly, Jin slams his hand on the floor and startles Lua. Slowly he speaks and tells Lua that he did not honestly care about these superstitions, and that all he was interested in knowing was what in the world Lua was up to. It is a dark, cloudy night, the moon hidden from sight. Gray buildings stand stark against the even grayer sky. From the windows peeks out light. The source of one of those light is the room in which sit two people, one on the couch and the other on the floor at the table. Jin's father sits on the couch watching TV, while the Jin's mother peels vegetables. She looks up at the man when he asks her about how someone is doing these days and if he is eating well. Jin's mother is quiet and looks down. She reminisces that the last time she went inside his room, she saw bread, so he must have eaten. Jin's father then looks at Jin's mother. Jin's mother looks down as she says that she is not the one who bought the bread for him, so she has no idea how it was there. Perhaps he had had it delivered, or that he had perhaps gone out. Jin's father then tries to comfort Jin's mother, saying that perhaps she had bought it for him and then forgotten about it because he had collapsed the last time after he had accepted a delivery, and that she should stop worrying about that punk because it was not like he was going to starve himself to death. The mood in the room darkens as Jin's father says that if the boy were brave enough to die like that, he would not be acting like that in the first place. Jin's mother looks solemn as she looks at the door to Jin's room and says she does not even know what to do anymore. She remarks that seeing the door used to be so frustrating, but now she feels as if there's nothing beyond that door anymore. It almost feels useless. The scene flashes back to Jin standing in his room in front of his mother as he tells her to leave him alone. Jin's mother looks at the table in front of her as a voice in the background says it wishes it could disappear. Lua is startled and scared as he asks Jin what he means by what Lua might be up to. He is scared, thinking that Jin must have noticed the potion in the tea. He looks at Jin. Jin smirks and then in one go downs the tea containing the potion, and then sighs and slams the glass on the table in front of them. Bard says Jin should think carefully about who they are trying to trick, currently referring to himself and his companions, while Lua thinks to himself that he actually did manage to trick Jin. According to Jin, the foolish king is ruining the country, and that's what the Bard songs are always like, but the weird thing is that the king's castle was not a place that just about anyone could enter. There was almost a dungeon in the sky, a most glorious thing. Had any of the bards made a song after actually looking at the king in person? Lua comments that he does not know why Jin would ask him this, since bards had been trying their best to sing the truth and that as a bard Luo might be lacking since he had not been in the profession for too long, but the members of his troupe had been risking their lives in order to carry out this type of work. Bard says Lua have been using the very opinions of people who have been beside the king in their lyrics. At this point, Jin interrupts Lua and questions him. Beside the king, who would that be? Lua slams a hand over his mouth as he realizes he had spoken too much, and then says that information was confidential and that Jin should not ask him that. According to Jin, it did not sound as if Lua had been talking about servants or guards, so that would leave the nobility. Lua is startled when Jin questions him further. Bards were being bribed by the nobles to make songs. Lua is outraged when he tells Jin that they had never been bribed and that the nobles were just worried about the state of the country. Jin has a euphoric moment when he parades how he was right about it being the nobles who were behind the songs even if the bards had not been bribed. Jin then thinks about his past and tells Lua how he had been turned into trash because of the words of the people who had never met him, so even thought he was not fully aware of the kind of person the king was. All he wanted was for Lua to see for himself that he wanted to blame someone else that much. The scene fades out, focusing on Lua's clenched fist.